Yo, uh, I don't really do this kind of content. In fact, I'm not really a YouTuber at all. But this is a topic that's really important to me, and there's a real chance that we can make a change. So here I am, I guess. Uh, yeah, I'm gonna do this. This is about the ongoing European Citizens Initiative called Stop Killing Games. I would really prefer if video games didn't just get killed for no reason, so I guess I'm for it. I have some gripes with the video game industry. I think it's for the best I explain to you what those are before I start the whole response thing. Because, as you might have noticed, the title of the video mentions pirate software, also known as Thor. And I also have some real issues with his video because, for one thing, he doesn't seem to have a good grasp on how Citizens Initiative is supposed to work. And two, he doesn't really know what the actual goal is, the goal of the campaign, as he misrepresents it in his video. And as a result, a lot of the points in this video are straw man arguments. So what's my problem with the video game industry? The problem is when I buy a video game, sometimes it gets taken away from me again at a later date. And I didn't know that was going to happen. And that's kind of ridiculous to me, and I'm not sure that happens in any other industry. Like, imagine I were to craft a table, I sell it to someone, and after 5 years, they say, hey, I'm not sure if you read my terms of service. There was a fine print there somewhere in the contract, and when I told you I was selling you a table, I actually didn't mean that I sell you a table. I redefined what the word purchase, buy, or sell means in these terms of service or in the end user license agreement, whatever. And I redefined these words as, hey, you only bought a license to the tables, and I have the right to take it away from you at any time I want. So I'm taking it away from you. Bye. And then your table is gone. The seller took your money, and at a random time later, they take it away from you again, and they keep your money as well. Yeah, that's kind of what's going on with the video game industry. Sometimes you buy a game, it says buy on the store page, and then they say, and it relies on an online server to function, and they can shut down that server, and then you can't play the game anymore. In my opinion, like that's just my sense of justice. Uh, I don't think that's okay. I don't think you should have the ability to sell somebody something, then redefine what the word sell means in your contract, terms of service, or whatever, which nobody really reads anyway because it's a lot of these are long texts, many pages. You have to almost be a lawyer to even understand what any of this nonsense means. And then somewhere in the text they say, oh, you didn't buy anything, it was just a license or something, we take it away now, we keep your money. I don't think that's acceptable. That's kind of what this campaign is about. What it intends to stop is video game producers, publishers, developers creating a video game, selling it to someone, and then taking it away without their consent. I should also mention that for a lot of people, this campaign is also about game preservation, but that's not really an angle that's not the angle I'm coming from. I'm kind of a I'm kind of a cynic and a pessimist. I don't think we can force someone to preserve what they created. And I think if somebody wants to make something and have it be destroyed, that's their right. However, I don't think they should be able to destroy it after they sold it to somebody without telling them that this was going to happen. Now, a lot of people will say to this, you should have read the terms of service, the end user license agreements, everything to understand that this was going to be taken away from you at an arbitrary date. But as I just said, this is really not something I should have to do. I don't think you should be able to use language that suggests that I purchase a product from you, I consider that an unfair business practice. And not only that, but the European legislation seems to agree with me on this because, for example, there's this whole page on unfair contract terms, which has a big list of many different ways a contract can be considered unfair. And that includes changing the language or redefining language such as purchase or buy, or having the contract be one-sided, such as, hey, I can shut down the servers whenever I want, take the product away from you, and you can't decide anything. So they have the right to stop letting you have your product, but you have no say on the matter. So the contract is one-sided, things like that. So it doesn't really seem like the terms of service or end-user license agreements that we have for many modern games are all that legal under European legislation. Now, a lot of other people will say, okay, maybe they don't use the correct language on the store page, but everybody knows what a live service game is or what an always online game is. You can tell, and they'll probably tell you that you should know that you're just buying a license or that you're just kind of renting the game, that it's a service. And the service ends sometime, right? That also seems to clash with the European legislation. As for example, we have the Directive 2011/83/EU, which states that a service must state an end date. So when you make a purchase or subscribe to the service, so let's say I pay $60 to rent The Crew, the game that was shut down by Ubisoft, but they never actually told me what the expiration date is. So this directive clearly states that for something to be considered a service, it has to have an end date stated, but The Crew never stated when it will shut down. It just did so at an arbitrary date, and that's how every single always online game works. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like they are goods because they just get taken away from you. They sort of function like a service, except they don't tell you when it ends. So something isn't right here. So I think this is a really unfair situation for consumers, and it seems like EU legislation agrees on that. One other thing people might say is, well, if you want to solve the problem, just stop buying these games. And for me, that's where the real problem starts. I mean, this isn't a real solution for various other reasons, but for me, the problem is I can't even not buy them because I keep buying always online games by accident. For example, recently I purchased Enshrouded, and only later I learned that the multiplayer server, I mean, it gives you a private server, but this server has to connect to the internet, and there's some DRM, so that means the multiplayer is always online. And I had absolutely no idea this was going to happen. So at some point they will shut down the servers, and I can no longer play this game in multiplayer, even though that's what I purchased it for, sorry. Another recent example is I purchased the Mega Man Collection 2 on Steam, and that game is always online. Even though the previous game, the first Mega Man Collection, is not always online. So that's another game where either it will be taken away from me, or if I am lucky, they will, release a patch that makes it offline playable. But either way, I'm trying to avoid buying always online games to make this practice stop. I don't want to give them my money if they are going to take the product away from me, but I can't avoid it. There is nothing that tells me on the store page whether a game is always online or not. They don't tell me, hey, I will take it away from you at a later time. Like again, people will say, oh man, this is so obvious, you know what a live service game is, but how could I expect it? I couldn't have expected Enshrouded to be that. I couldn't have expected the Mega Man Collection to be that. It just, everything slowly changes, right? I mean, Diablo 1, Diablo 2. Oh, wait, is it pronounced Diablo? I don't actually know. Diablo 1 and 2 were offline playable, and you can play multiplayer in LAN. Like, you can play over the internet with friends if you host your own virtual private networks or via direct connections, right? And then Diablo 3 came out, and again, I had no idea the game was always online. Nobody said that. It just they just do it and they don't tell you. It's such an unfair situation, man. I I just can't comprehend how this is even legal. And I mean, I'm someone who has been playing video games oh, for way over 20 years, like over 25 years or something. So if I can tell, there definitely is a problem. And if you are not convinced, then let me show you this or tell you this list, depending on whether you're just listening. Anyway, I'm just going to give you examples of games that are very similar to one another, but one of them has an offline mode or can be played offline in multiplayer, whatever. So it's not always online. And the other is always online. So we have Team Fortress 2, Overwatch 2, Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood, Dota 2, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Valorant, Gang Beasts, Animal Party, Helldivers, Helldivers 2. Can you tell me, can you figure out which of these games will not be taken away from you because they are not always online? You can't tell me you get them right all the time. Maybe if you are really into the gaming industry bubble, you might know, but the average person has no chance to figure this out. They just can't. Like, and by the way, the solution is the first game that I listed each time is offline playable or has private servers or has LAN mode or all of those things. So, for example, Team Fortress 2, private servers, LAN mode, offline play, single player, everything. Overwatch 2, always online. Left 4 Dead 2, private servers, LAN, and so on. Back 4 Blood, always online. Gang Beasts. Oh yeah, look, that's an offline couch co-op game. And Animal Party looks like it's just that, a clone of that, right? But Animal Party is always online. What is even going on, you know? What is going on? I cannot make an informed purchase decision. There's no way. The industry is totally, for lack of a better word, fucked. This is fucked. I This is impossible, man. So, yeah, this really grinds my gears, man. I just want to purchase a game and play it, and in 5 years, if I decide, hey, I want to play this game again, I want it to still be there. I don't want to purchase something that disappears for no reason, okay? I So, at the very least, what needs to happen is that the store pages under what I think should happen under the EU legislation, as they word it, when a game is always online and gets shut down, they need to tell me on the store page, yo, this will last for a minimum of 3 years, let's say. We guarantee this will be online for 3 years, and you rent your access to our servers. This is not a product with when you give us $60, you rent access to our servers for 3 years, and maybe we even let you on these servers for a little bit longer. But and I'm pretty sure this will be a wake-up call to a lot of people, right? I mean, this doesn't seem like a great solution for anyone, but it's the truth. It's what the consumer needs to be informed. The consumer will, a lot of people will probably say, oh, maybe 1 year, maybe only 3 years, only 1 year, whatever it will say, maybe only a few months. I don't want to give them $60 if they can shut it down in maybe a couple months. Yeah, so probably this will probably cause sales of always online live service games to plummet. So the publishers or developers probably don't even want to do this. But it needs to happen because that's the truth. what the consumer needs to be able to make an informed purchasing decision. Like for me, the only solution seems to be to no longer buy any video games, right? Because every time I buy something, I only learn way later on that it's not playable offline. That I will lose access to something that I thought I purchased. I thought I purchased a good, a product. Again, like I said, I'm not touching the preservation angle at all. If a company decides we make this game and we want to destroy it at a later date, so be it. I don't like it, but it's what it is, okay? I just want to know. I just want to know that this is what's going to happen. And that really pisses me off that they don't tell me. And this is somehow they've been getting away with it for 10 years or something like that. It's crazy. So yeah, preservation, whatever. I don't care. I'm too cynic for that, too pessimistic. So with all of that said, I really want to get into Thor's video, what this is about, right? In the thumbnail, in the title, I respond to Thor. Because due to his misunderstandings, he really makes everything look real bad. Like, or he paints the campaign in a bad light for no apparent reason, because he doesn't understand how it works, right? So I've been rambling on for long enough, so let's just get on with it.
So let's go into how this works and why this is an issue to me. First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation.
Well, this is something to keep in mind. He does say that it's not law, but he still doesn't really seem to understand what it means. It's important for later in his videos.
The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative.
Okay. This is the part where he already misrepresents the initiative, because I don't know where he got the idea that this is only about single player games. It's not. Or like he says, it's about single player games that get shut down because they had online components that didn't need to be there. That's not what the campaign is about. It's about what I just said in my preamble. It's about the fact that video games are sold as products to consumers, and then they get shut down like they were a service, but the consumer was never informed that it was a service, and it never stated an end date either. So that's the problem, right? The consumer doesn't have the ability to make an informed purchase decision, and this concerns all games that are presented like that, not just single player. Every game that you purchase, it gets shut down, but that didn't have an end date, right? And that says on the store page, buy this game. So that's all games.
Under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat.
I just explained that he is mistaken here, and it's weird that he says it's not possible in all video games, because should something come out of this initiative, come from this initiative rather, then any new games made will abide to these laws, and they will be designed in such a way that it is possible. So that's not really an issue.
It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How?
I mean, it's funny that he says it's going to damage all live service games. I mean, yeah, they probably have to put in a little bit more effort so that consumers can keep playing the games they purchased. Or they have to be honest with people and state the end date, which will also damage quote unquote live service games. But I mean, it has to happen. You can't make a one-sided contract with a consumer like the EU says, right? You can't sell somebody a table, like I said in the beginning, and then come to them and take the table away again. You can't do that. Yes, it will damage, quote unquote, damage me that I can't take the table away again, but I can't do that because that's unfair to the consumer. So yeah, I don't know why it's weird.
How would you keep League of Legends in a functional, playable state?
Yeah, how would you? I mean, okay, I have something to say to that, but I'll unpause the video for now.
You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do 1 billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told, right? So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games.
Hey, League of Legends is not an example that makes sense in this context. That really doesn't show that it doesn't work, because League of Legends already has a LAN mode. Riot Games uses it in official tournaments. So in that environment, they don't use the server, they use LAN. So I guess it's just peer-to-peer. I don't know how it works exactly. But yeah, it's not a great example. You can totally preserve League of Legends. They already put in the work for their tournaments, right? But even if they didn't, what's the problem with just releasing the server code, right? Like he just explained, we run the game through servers and whatnot. But if you just give me the server software, I can host my own server. So that's not an issue.
Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense.
EU doesn't really work like that. It doesn't have precedents like the USA does.
With people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games.
It's important to note that it's not going to just get worked out by the government, not just politicians. There will be experts involved, people from the gaming industry, so developers, publishers, I presume gamers, people who understand the medium. So there will be people who have some of these nuances, understand the nuances, I mean. And I mean, there was a German political party that discussed the issue, and they seem to know about the nuances pretty well. So I'm not that concerned about that.
I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is these specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's The Crew. So action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore. If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that.
I guess these are two different issues. I should have stopped at the player base one. The one with the player base is irrelevant I mean, the point is that 12 million people own the game. That's the point. Like, it doesn't matter that not all people keep playing the game simultaneously or whatever. These are people who own the game and who have the right to keep playing it because they own the product, the good. That's the point. 12 million people have been robbed of their product. It doesn't matter if not all of them want to play it again. The problem is that they have been taken the right away from them that they can. They can no longer play the game, even if they don't. Doesn't matter if they don't want to. So, yeah. And then he talks about, yeah, at some point the servers cost more to run the game, too much to run the game because not enough people are playing on it. And I mean, yeah, that's cool, but we want to play the game irrespective of your servers. So you don't have to keep running servers. You can just give us the server software or make the game playable in LAN mode, right? Or in offline mode if you wish. I mean, if I buy a multiplayer game, I want to keep the multiplayer as well. I don't like that some people think it's fine if we just keep the single player. If I purchase a multiplayer game, I want to keep the multiplayer even if it has single player. Okay? And the second thing he said about the bad business practice, what he thinks is the issue, that a company sells a game that is always online, but pretends to be a single player game. I mean, doesn't pretend it is a single player game, but you have to be connected to the internet. Yeah, that's a bad business practice, but this also applies to multiplayer games. I don't know why he thinks those are exempt. They are not. I mean, he just seems to live in his video game bubble and he can tell which game is a live service game or whatever, and then he thinks, yeah, everybody knows this will shut down. But that's not the case. It used to be normal that video games could be played forever, and they used to all have LAN modes, right? So the average person isn't going to know that, and even if they did, that doesn't make this practice okay. So it's not just single player games, but I already explained that, so let's keep going.
Not all companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies.
No, again, he has the wrong idea. He misrepresents what the campaign is about. It's about all online games, always online games that are sold as products. It's not just about games that are single player games but are still always online. So he just gets that wrong.
So let's take a look at this and find out more about the crew itself. If we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. Oh. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game. And they shut it down 10 years later.
Again, he says, yeah, it's an always online service-based game, but they never told you that. That's the problem. They sold it as a product, and it's really a service, and there's no stated end date, so it shouldn't fly in the EU, right? And again, my sense of justice says this isn't good either. I have a strong gut feeling against this. Like, this is really unfair to the consumer.
March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games.
Yeah, it's normal now. It used to not be normal. Like I already explained, like most games, I mean every game in the past was always playable because it wasn't there was no server, there was only LAN modes, and only later we got games that relied on a server and for some reason didn't give you the server software. Because a lot of games that rely on servers like Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, Dota, those games do rely on servers, but they give you private servers and so you can host them, right? I mean, they don't even rely on Valve games all have LAN modes, so they don't even rely on servers, but you get the idea.
The only thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they post it as not an online-only experience. But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online only.
Again, does not matter. It was sold as a product, not as a service.
If you're going to be buying an online-only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut. If
Yep, it makes sense to him, but it doesn't make sense to me for the stated reason. Also, I forgot to say, uh, I mean, his argument that this is normal is, of course, not relevant. I mean, normal doesn't mean anything. It's not an argument. What was it? It was a fallacy. What was it? What was the fallacy called? Uh, appeal to tradition or something? Appeal to tradition. But as I said, that's the new normal. This didn't used to be normal, right? So
It's online only. If it's a single player experience that has online only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you. That's a shitty business practice.
but it's also a shitty business practice otherwise. Again, he doesn't understand the issue at all.
That's really rare. And in the specific
It's not rare at all. Like I said, I bought Enshrouded, and for some reason it's always online. The multiplayer is. I bought the Mega Man 2 collection, and that's always online. Why? I don't know. But it's not rare. This is not rare at all.
the cases where it does happen, we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018. And then it had another sequel that came out in 2023. And if we go to the Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this, it's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms. We look at the max here. It did start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded. And it had a major drop-off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it. And then
It's normal, but I don't care. If I bought the Crew and don't want to play the Crew 2, I should be able to play the Crew. I don't know why he's making this argument. It just doesn't matter. It's just I don't know.
and the servers effectively die. You can't run a live service game on this few players.
No, but that's not what we are asking for, right? I just want to keep playing the game in LAN mode, or you give me the server to host it myself. That's it. I would actually prefer it if publishers didn't even offer these servers. I don't care. I would prefer to make my own server for almost every game, because then I can play these games with just my friends. Keep trolls away, keep cheaters away, right? I would prefer if they just gave me the servers.
You can't most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that anything else, and we could see that there was license problems. So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted the Crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions, and announced that the game's servers would shut down on March 31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies. And a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years. And that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, I understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry while I've been working in it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forego the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure.
Yeah. Why does this matter to the player is my question. Like, to go back to the table example in the beginning, if I don't know, if I carve a famous painting onto my table and I bought a license so I can sell the table with the painting, and the license agreement says, hey, you have to destroy the table after 1 year because that's just our license. The table must be destroyed. If I make some license agreement like that, where the game has to be destroyed unless I pay for another license or whatever, then I probably shouldn't be selling the table to someone else and not even mention that this is going to happen, right? So what is this argument? It doesn't matter to the consumer. And if anything comes from these from the initiative, then going forward, games will not be made with such licensing agreements, which are totally ridiculous. But I mean, that's how it already works in most games, right? Like, a lot of games have licensed cars. and they still work, and they are always offline playable. So this is another point that is just really irrelevant and misses the point, right?
And there are some people that'll say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels.
Oh no, developer time and money. I have to put money into a product, and this money ensures that when I sell the product to someone, it doesn't get destroyed. Oh no. I already mentioned that, but if you have to spend a little bit more money to make sure that the consumer has a working product, then that's what it is. The consumer needs to have a working product. Like, I could take this logic and reverse it, right? I could say, hey, why can't developers just upload an empty exe file to Steam, right? It's in they have the screenshots, the promotional videos, and everything on the store page. But when you buy the game, it downloads an empty exe file to your computer, and you can't play it because it's just an empty exe file. And then when I complain, they say, "Oh, but if we actually have to make the game, we have to spend more money." No shit, no shit. So yeah, if what it takes to have a functioning product is to spend some more money on it, you have to do that because you can't be unfair to the consumer. This is ridiculous. This is something that was mentioned in a recent Russ Scott video, who is, I guess, the most prominent figure in this campaign because he brought it to life in the first place, right? And he said that in the past, car manufacturers didn't have to include seat belts for cars. And when the laws were changed, so they have to do that, they complained because they have to spend more money on producing the car. But the consumer has to be, the driver has to be protected, right? Like, this just needs to happen. Some things cost money, sure, but they have to happen. It's just that you can't put it any other way, right? You can't sell a consumer a faulty product, and if what it takes to have the product not faulty is to invest more time and money, you have to do it. There's no other way around it.
Out and the game has basically no players left anyway.
If you don't want to do that, then you can just make the game and not sell it. That's also a possibility.
It makes more sense to just move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies. And
yeah, of course. If I could get away with scummy business practices, then yeah, I would have that ideology. No, I personally wouldn't because I'm not a scumbag. But yeah, he's just saying the developers have gotten away with screwing the players, and so they want to keep doing it. That's their perspective. Wow. That doesn't matter. The problem is that the consumer is getting fucked. You have to protect the consumer. Like, this is a really unfair relation right now. Like, the gaming industry has a really unfair relation with its consumers due to this.
That's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it.
It's not okay. It's not okay to have an ideology that the other party is getting screwed. That's not an okay ideology to have. It's not.
Because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every...
Yeah, again, a burden to deliver a functioning product. Oh no, what a burden.
Studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV. And even though I don't play anymore, League of Legends or any other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, like even phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about any of these? We'd never get any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat.
Again, I said it several times, but he doesn't really know what the idea is, right? It's not just about single player games, blah 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 blah. So the initiative is good as it is. It's about all games, even though he thinks it's not. But this is also a really disingenuous point that he's making there, because he's just saying, hey, if developers have to, or I mean publishers or developers have to make sure that the game functions beyond their own hosting of their own servers, then they will no longer make live service games. I really, really doubt that. Like, there's a lot of money in this business, right? Like, you're going to tell me just because the developer has to shut down the game and then give you the servers or the server files or give you a LAN mode. That's the reason no one is going to make live service games anymore? What? I mean, there are so many examples of live service games that shipped with private servers, like Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, Dota, and there are other games like I mean MMOs like World of Warcraft that have community-made servers, right? And that didn't kill the game to have that. So what even is he on about? Why does he think that? I mean, there's we have enough examples of live service games with private servers. So this is, I think he's just being disingenuous here. I don't know where he gets the idea that this would stop people from making live service games. Pretty sure it would not.
Which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem.
Again, it's not the problem, but I said this a million times, so...
So now we're going to go to Ross, otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, or that politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win.
So I don't really care too much about this. I mean, this is probably the reason why most people really don't like Thor in this situation, because I mean, he refuses to discuss the issue with someone that could help make him understand. Just because he said one thing that he doesn't agree with. What? I mean, like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe Ross is wrong. I don't know. I don't really know myself how politicians work. I mean, in general, it seems like they don't care too much about video games. But you could also be right in that he's saying, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money, so maybe they do care about the industry itself. But I don't really know. I mean, the thing is, Ross only said that to encourage people to vote, right? Because he says, yes, there is a chance. So it's, I don't know, it's mostly a motivational speech. But I don't know why Thor thinks he means that this is why it should pass. Where does he get that idea? He just said it to encourage people to vote. Obviously, we believe it's the right thing, and Ross also explains why it's the right thing. But this part just says, "Hey, there's a real chance, right? Just a chance." And the fact that this is why he doesn't discuss it with him, it just doesn't make sense. But anyway.
And politicians don't care. This sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to be sending the right message. which this is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
Yeah, so again, he doesn't know what the problem is. But I mean, there's another thing he doesn't understand, which is that the EU mandates that the initiative has to be worded vague. It has to be vague. And there's even a character limit. Like Russ said that in another video he posted where he explained, there was even a character limit, right? So they couldn't have been specific about anything. It doesn't work. The initiative is only there to say, hey, there's a problem. The problem is we are buying a product and then it gets taken away from us. What's going on, right? Like that. I'm poorly paraphrasing here, and it says a little bit more. But the thing is, the initiative has to be vague, and then the nuances get figured out later. Like I said, by actual experts, developers, gamers, politicians. That's as far as I understand. They all come together to figure this out, and it could take maybe even years, right? So I don't know. Yeah, he probably just doesn't understand that.
And we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you're not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're under this weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies, it is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not.
That's just. I mean, why does he think that just because it is there means it has to be in line with consumer with these policies? No. I mean, things get overlooked, right? If you are the player, you have to actually go and sue those companies when they take your games away, right? A lot of people don't do this. And so the governments don't even realize this is an issue, right? So I don't know where he gets that idea. And again, the other things he said are things that I explained in the beginning. Like he says, yes, in the terms of service, they explain you didn't buy the game, you bought access to the servers or whatever. Then why does it say on the store page, buy the game? It says buy game, purchase game. Like I said, you can't just redefine what these terms mean. The EU says you can't do that. And I agree. I mean, nobody should do that. They just have to be honest, right? They just have to say, rent game on the store page, and then there's an expiration date. Rent access to our servers for 1 year, $60, please. And I think, this would go a long way to mitigate the problem. Like I said, I think the ship has sailed for game preservation. You can't really enforce that. But other than that, if they're just being honest, then I can actually avoid purchasing these kinds of games. But right now, I keep purchasing them by accident because I don't know any better. And that's a real problem. I'm getting fucked. Shouldn't be that way.
Not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change.
But that's all games.
That language should change. You are not purchasing the game. You are not buying the game. You are paying to have a license to a live service experience. I
don't know why this is all games. Like he thinks it's okay to say buy a game on the store page and then have fine prints in the many pages long EULA or terms of service where they somewhere say, yeah, you're not actually buying the game, you're just renting access to whatever, or we have servers. I don't know what it says, but you can't do that. I just inform me properly. Don't be scummy.
Get that. Is that what this is doing, though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically.
I said it can't do that. There's a character limit, and it has to be vague. It has to. Otherwise, it's not an initiative. That's how this works. It's only there to call out the problem, and that's it. the problem that consumers have, not the details on how to stop it or whatever he thinks we need to do first, like or the details on which games do it and which games don't, because that would just, I mean, that would also just create loopholes from the get-go, I presume, and also because the initiative, it has to be short and vague. It can't be any other way. Otherwise it's not a citizens' initiative. It's just not.
It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And
My God. Yeah, I mean, but it is being called out. It is actually being called out, right? He just doesn't understand that it's all games. He just thinks it's only single-player games disguised as, live service games disguised as single-player games or whatever. He thinks that that's not the issue.
finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it and they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And
Here, I'd just like to say I don't care about any dangers, because the thing is, we are already getting fucked, right? I mean, we've already hit rock bottom, so to speak. Like, gamers have absolutely no say, no rights. They buy the game disappears. Companies can do anything they want with us. Yeah, so I don't care about your dangers. We are already way past danger. We have nothing left. So I really don't care, okay? I don't care what happens to you, because you've already fucked us. Like, it's actually time to turn the tables here.
I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that, and I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative. Stop.
Yeah, again, if he wants to disagree with these points, I mean, you can, of course. And I don't really have an opinion on that, because I'm not sure I really don't know what politicians think about video games. I don't know why Ross thinks he knows that either. I just don't have an opinion, and he's free to disagree. But the ridiculous part is that he doesn't want to talk to Ross because of that, and that he misrepresents it as, yeah, this is why it should pass. No, it's not why it should pass. It's just reasons why it may succeed.
Killing games. You're not going to change my mind on it, because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry. I think that it will be bad for both developers and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue.
I mean, he said in the beginning it's not law, so I'm not even sure why he thinks it's a problem, that it's vague. Like, what is it he doesn't understand, right? And it just says that there is a problem, and it explains the problem. That's all it needs to do. But again, he doesn't understand what the initiative is, what an initiative is, and what the goal is. So
is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So if we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that.
Yeah, and that's all games. Every live service game, every always online game, live service or not, says buy on the store page. But again, I guess he thinks it's okay if it redefines what buy means in the terms of service. I don't know why he thinks that's okay. This is really ridiculous to me, but okay.
That needs to go away. A player should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not...
Yeah, exactly. And you don't do that by redefining what the word purchase means in the terms of service. You don't.
buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up, though. It just attacks all video games that have online-only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely.
Yes. It attacks all video games because all video games do this. I mean, always online video games do this. I don't know why you think they don't.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either.
I mean, those people are probably mostly joking because they don't like practices used in live service games. But this wouldn't kill live service games. All of Valve games like Team Fortress and Counter-Strike still exist, even though they are live service, and even though they gave away the server software right from the purchase of the game. I mean, right from the release of the game, they gave away the server. They had a LAN mode, and despite that, there's very successful live service games with live service elements. So, what's the problem?
Service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They're about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird.
Oh my god, I don't even know. Does he even realize what he's saying right now? I mean, does he realize that the publishers are destroying these games? Like, if I liked The Crew or Final Fantasy or whatever, and they destroy these games, the publishers, they do it themselves. They are the ones who are doing it. Like, I mean, the name of the campaign is called Stop Killing Games. It's not about killing games, and now he's like, oh, it will kill live service games. What the? Yeah, I mean, I know he responds to the people joking about, yeah, that's cool that live service games will stop existing. But I mean, they won't. And the fact that he says, it sucks that you want them to die because some people like them. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point of the campaign. We want these games to not die, right? We like them. We want to keep playing. So a lot of the points he makes are just really tone deaf or contradictory. Kind of weird.
I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this is why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's...
I mean, a lot of the things he said is just... I mean, he already said those things and I already responded, right? But no, again, he doesn't understand how this works. Like, if this passes... Or like if this gets brought to the parliament, only then the nuances will be figured out, again, by people from the industry. So I guess he just doesn't know that.
It's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So for everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it. I'm not going to change my stance on that because I can't agree with this.
I mean, if you don't even know what the problem is, then yeah. I mean, I'm angry that you have already decided that you won't change your stance, right? You won't discuss it with anyone like Ross because you disagree with one thing and because you don't understand the initiative. Come on, man. What is this? Why are most of his arguments so anti-consumer? It's so weird.
Both as a dev and a player. I see the danger involved, I see the vagueness in the language, and it doesn't make sense to me. If we want to fight for better conditions for players, then fight the actual problem.
We do. So, I mean, we are, sorry. Like I said, the actual problem is games are being sold as a product, or they only tell you it's not a product in the terms of service, so they redefine what buy means. Not okay. And even if they are services, then they really need to state an end date. I want to know how long I can play a game for. If I buy a live service game today, it could shut down in a month. It could shut down tomorrow. It could shut down in 20 years. You don't know. That's really that's a problem. So it also needs to say when it ends, right? Like, these games are neither services nor are they products. It just doesn't make sense. But again, Thor doesn't understand that problem. He doesn't understand that that's a problem. For some reason, he thinks we just want single player games to keep existing, which have always online components. And he thinks it's okay for multiplayer games to just die because they are multiplayer live service. I don't know why he thinks that's a good reason for them to die, but okay. I mean, I guess he kind of says, yeah, it's because it's so complicated. You have a server and or the developers don't want to spend money to make the game playable, even though they sold the game. They should spend money to keep it playable because they sold a product to players, right? Or alternatively, they should state an end date if they want their game to be an actual service, like services normally work, right? And then he made a second video, so let's get right onto that.
Hi, my name is Jason Thorhall, also known as Pirate Suffer, and the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games, saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or...
I don't know why he even says any of this. Why do you have to say, hey, this video was received positively, and like, it's not part of the argument? Like, if that was the case, you wouldn't have to say it. And I mean, it's weird because it seems like the like ratio is actually not that great. And if you have like an extension installed, like bring back YouTube dislikes, and I know it's not accurate because it's extrapolating likes and dislikes from the users who have the extension installed, but still, there's a lot of dislikes. I mean, over a third of the thumbs given are thumbs down, right? So something is amiss, I think. I mean, even though the extension isn't accurate, right? The API or whatever, however it works, most videos still have a positive like to dislike ratio if they are a well-received video, even with the extension. So this is still unusual, right? He has a lot of dislikes on the video, and I don't know why he feels the need to say any of this. Again, it has nothing to do with the argument.
A job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you.
Almost like he's trying to gaslight us into thinking, yeah, people agreed with it, but that's the other thing. It seems like nobody agrees, right? I mean, obviously some people will agree, but if you look at the comments, like every single comment is negative. Like every single comment disagrees with him and debunks him, and these comments have thousands of likes. What even? I haven't even found a single comment that agrees with him, like as a top comment. I mean, the people debating it in the sub comments, right? But yeah, no, I don't know what he's trying to do here. I think he's trying to gaslight us into thinking that people agree generally, but I don't think that's the case. Again, it has nothing to do with the argument.
If you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies. And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common requirement of the...
I don't really care. I mean, I'm not sure this is even true, because a lot of developers have spoken out about it, and a lot of developers are being very positive about it. But I mean, it's possible that some developers can't say anything ever, but it's fine. I mean, if it's a publisher or their parent company who disallows them from speaking up, then maybe the company should do it if they cared, right? So again, I don't know what his point is.
Initiative, which is games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well, if you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now.
No, please don't make it single player. I want to play multiplayer.
Some way to keep it functional and playable, right? Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this.
I mean, there are different ways, right? Maybe I don't need the server software. Maybe all I need is a LAN mode or something like that. I mean, there are probably different ways. Or they can design the game so they have a server version of the server that is designed for consumers, right? Maybe they have a server that is corporate, functions a little bit differently, and the players get a consumer version of that server that leaves the game playable, but I mean, maybe remove some things related to microtransactions or player data or something like that.
But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you made your own video game and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for that. You can't just take someone else's art and profit off of it. Normal, right? So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional, playable state at end of life. So I hit you with a ton of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community. I destroy your Reddit. I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you. And it's not hard to do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in TF2 recently. The massive amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not infeasible. This is something that is very easily attainable today. And let's say that this goes on long enough that your game dies because you can't afford it anymore and your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional, playable state. At which point I take those, I create a private server, and I monetize it. And some people have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that? If you want a government initiative to enforce that, that means the government has to build a registry of all of those games and all of that intellectual property that shouldn't be monetized, and then somehow enforce that with no one owning it because those studios have shut down. That's going to be a massive burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route and say the company has to go and control it, well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just able to be monetized now? Again, this was obtained through abuse of the original creator. I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario gets even worse if you do allow monetization, because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem. So allowing monetization of this work is strictly worse. And for those of you out there that say, oh, this can be done right now, I could just destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway. You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal to do so. That's the problem.
Yeah, this is a long one, and it's my God. Okay, so so this is a bit of fear mongering, I would say. So he's coming up with a hypothetical scenario that is really, really bad and whatever. So the thing is, he already said it's already happening, but this would make it legal. I don't know where he gets that idea. So you know that IP laws don't change because of this, right? The IP still exists, and somebody has the rights, and they can sue people who do this. If the company doesn't exist anymore, in this extreme hypothetical example where the company has to shut down because of bot attacks or whatever, if somebody tried to monetize it, you could still just sue them. Somebody is going to own the IP, even after they shut down. Somebody probably bought the IP. So I don't understand why he thinks that makes it legal. It's a really strange argument, and again, I think it's just fear mongering. So, and the example he gave, right, with Team Fortress 2, like Team Fortress 2 again is a game that already has private servers, and the reason it was attacked was because there are people who wanted to be cheaters. They just wanted to see others suffer and cheat against them, right? Like in a way that they didn't even have to play the game, because these were bots, like they were automated players, so they didn't even have to play themselves. They just had to see their bots go and be a menace to other players. So this stuff already happens, and companies already protect themselves against it. This is already a thing, right? It doesn't matter if it's because, and I mean, who would do this? Is such a strange example. It's so extreme, right? Like, imagine y- who would imagine you just see a live service game and are like, oh, I want to monetize it. So now we will pay, we will pay money to send many bots against them in the hopes of profiting off of it afterwards. And I mean, there's not even the chance that this works is kind of low, right? Because other people also have access to the server software, so they can host the game themselves. There's not really a great incentive to go to a monetized server if everyone can host the game and play. So again, I mean, no, it doesn't make it legal. I don't know why he thinks that this is a route to make it legal. Like attacking servers with bots and stuff is already illegal. Companies can sue. They have already sued players. Like this already happens. There's not really a new issue here that is being created. And since he likes his hypothetical examples so much, I would like you to imagine a hypothetical alternate universe. And in this universe, it's the other way around. Like servers, I mean companies already give out the server software after the end of life of a game. This is already a common practice. It's established in law that they have to do it so people can keep playing the game if they bought it, right? So then somebody says, hey, there's an issue. Or let's say somebody working at a game developer or publisher says, hey, there's a problem. We are getting attacked by bots or something like that, or exploits, and it's probably so they can monetize the servers, even though we could sue them if they ever did that. Even if our company goes under, somebody owns the IP and can sue. But it's still a problem that we are getting attacked because they are trying this. So what do you think the solution should be, right? Is the solution, hey, let's screw over the customer so they can no longer play the game when we end it? That doesn't sound like a solution to me. I'm pretty sure if you have a business model and this business model doesn't work because you're getting attacked by bots or exploits, then it's a problem with the business model. But you can't have the solution to screw over the customer who purchased your product in order to try and defend yourself against botting attacks and whatever, right? So the fact that this is already a thing, that this is also a thing with DRM, right? Not just always online games, but also other forms of DRM, that the consumer is getting fucked, so the company via the company trying to shield itself from pirates, or in this case, botters and exploiters. The solution can never be that you screw over the customer. This should not be the solution, so it has to change one way or another. This would be my hypothetical scenario. This is not fear-mongering from me like he does. This is just, hey, this is how it should be, and companies need to find a solution to their problems that aren't against the law and don't screw over the customer that paid for the game. But again, it's still a really strange and extreme example that is very unlikely to happen, I think, in the real world. Like, it already happens, and companies protect themselves already. Because people aren't just doing it because of the monetization thing. They do it because they want to, because they are dicks. That's it. There's already a solution, right? Companies already sue. Companies already have other things to protect themselves. So it's weird. This is a weird example. I think he's just trying to look for reasons so he can have a justification for his viewpoint, but this isn't it. This is really stupid.
After putting this out publicly and talking to people about it, this specific scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations, I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So, in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing. Well, you don't get to define what players get to play or not play. You also shouldn't be able to get to define what developers build or don't build. You should not have creative control over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone.
Again, we've been over this. He mentioned this in the last video. Like I said, those people are mostly joking, I think, because they don't like the live service game practices. But it's just so ridiculous to me how tone deaf he is when he says, you shouldn't have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. So why do game developers and publishers have control over what I have in my library? Why do I have control over the things I purchased? This is a really tone deaf thing to say. Like he says, hey, again, it's the same thing he said in the last video, but he's like, hey, I like live service games, why you want to take them away from me? And my response is, hey, I like live service games, why do you take them away from me? The developers and publishers are already doing this. Yeah, so, but again, he's responding to people who are mostly joking. This point is kind of not really relevant, but okay, let's keep going.
That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Aside from that, the initiative does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it.
No, not really. Like I said, there's already enough live service games that have private servers. Had them from the get-go, or maybe they were reverse engineered by the community and now we have private servers because of that. Yeah, it's already a thing and it's not really a huge risk. He's kind of making that up.
Which is why I'm bringing all of this up and why I don't support the initiative in the first place. A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore, which means
There's always the incentive. It exists. It is there for existing live service games, even those that have private servers. Even World of Warcraft, which has private servers built by the community. Like this, it doesn't even seem to damage live service games that are still active and have community servers. Like, why does he think this would end live service games? Why?
you get less multiplayer live experiences. That sucks. I like live service games.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that you would get less, but if a game is made so that it fucks the consumer at the end, then you can't make that. No, sorry. Even if you like that game, but you can't make it in that way. I hope you understand in the way that I mean this, but if you design a product in a way that it is against the law, like because you take it away from the consumer you sold it to, then you can't design a product that works that way. But again, I don't think there's any game that can't work like this, where you can just give people a server or a LAN mode or something like that.
I enjoy playing things like Final Fantasy XIV. I enjoy going and playing in games, in the past at least, like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run.
Oh, like I said, League of Legends already has a LAN mode, they just haven't given it out. And people have already reverse engineered it. So you could play it offline or in LAN mode or something. And those reverse engineered projects were DMCA'd by Riot Games. But it's totally possible. I don't know why he thinks that this is impossible. It's not.
And you shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to try to achieve, but
I mean, he's right if that's the only position you have, but I'm pretty sure these people are joking. I mean, if they are not, then he is right, yes.
You're also aggressively attacking other players instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation, and that it needs to happen to preserve these types of games for future generations and for everyone to always have forever.
Like I said, I don't care about this anymore. Too pessimistic. I guess. But it's part of the campaign, right? But I personally don't really have an opinion on that anymore. I would like to see games preserved because, in my opinion, they are art. But if the artist wants to destroy their art after making it, that they have the right to do that. Unless they sold the art to someone. It has to be a real service for that to make sense, right? Like, I agree with him that I mean, I need to listen to his point first because I forgot. It's been a while since I watched the video. Wait.
But I would argue that this isn't actually preserving these games.
Oh, oh God, no, he's making a really stupid point. I forgot. Okay, right, yeah. So my position is we don't need to, the artist doesn't have to be forced to preserve their art. So yeah, I kind of agree in that sense. But I disagree that you can destroy your own art if you have already sold it to someone, then you can't do it. That's the only exception. That's my problem.
Social games, such as, let's say,
Right, we have to re-listen to that because it's important.
argue that this isn't actually preserving these games.
So he says this isn't actually preserving these games. This point is ridiculous, but let's listen to it first.
Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends, require a number of players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting, right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch of people. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I have to interject here because now he's asking us, this is another tone deaf thing. He has so many tone deaf contradictory things. But now he asks us, hey, why would you want to play a game in this state? Like, didn't you just say, you just said you should not have control over what I have in my Steam library on my phone. You should not decide what games I can play that I enjoy. And now he says, why would you want to play it in that state? Are you serious? How do you manage to contradict yourself like that? One point from one point to the next. Oh my. Yeah. Hey, if I bought the thing, and I want to play it. Let me play it. Okay, you should not have control over what I want to play if I bought it. That's the point you just made. So you should have remembered that.
You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense.
Again, he says, hey, that doesn't make sense, so you shouldn't do it. But why would you want that? Even though I just told you I don't want you to have control over what I like and play and blah, blah, blah.
It's not preservation. And for those that may stop there and go, but private servers going to have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft. Again, we talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse to the developers.
Oh my God, and he finishes the point off with that. Like the ridiculous example that didn't even make sense to begin with. And now he says, like, he defeated his own point. He said, but players can already host their own servers with many people. And then he said, yeah, okay, but because I said in this hypothetical extreme scenario that's not cool, we can't do that. What? His points don't even, like that point doesn't even make sense. He talked about preservation and then he said, oh, they can be preserved, but I already told you can't preserve games because of this. He just uses this other point that has nothing to do with his argument about preservation to finish. This is a complete failure of logic. I don't know. This is like a total non sequitur argument. Yeah, and the other problem is, I mean, even though his problem, we have already established his point makes no sense, right? He said, oh, it's possible to preserve the games. Like I said, they should be preserved, but because of this, we can't do that. So he already defeated his own argument. But I also want to talk about his view on preservation, because that is also really ridiculous. He says, hey, we have to I have to argue that this is not real preservation because you have to preserve the game like it was. Um, I I don't know how to say. I need to look for an example. Like, okay, imagine you have a sandbox, and you use that sandbox for experiences, right? You build sandcastles and whatever, and you used to have 5 other people with you all the time, right? Who also build sandboxes. I mean sandcastles, and then one day there's only one other person you build a sandcastle with. So it's a bit of a different experience. Okay, sure. But why does this matter? We want to preserve the sandbox, and maybe if we get six, 5 other people or 6 other people one day, that's cool. Then it's back to the original state, right? And the logic behind this is also kind of faulty because we never we don't argue for preserving an experience. We don't argue for preserving an exact experience. We argue for preserving the video games, the sandbox, because every game is going to be completely different from one day to another. I mean, if I play Team Fortress and I play on a modded server with a Mario Kart mod or WarioWare or whatever mods you have, and the next day nobody plays that mod, and I instead play Two Fort, and there's a lot of people taunting and not really playing the game, and the next day I play in a 6v6 match competitive, and these are completely different experiences, and they all depend on players being there. Like, games change over the course of their lifespan, right? A new game has inexperienced players, and games keep going. And 20 years down the line, you will mostly find veteran players. Like, the experience is not the same. Of course not, because this is just other people doing something with the game. I'm not asking to preserve uh, sections of time or whatever he thinks he's arguing for, right? Like, yeah, I mean, should we shut down World of Warcraft because it's not preserved, right? I mean, the game used to have inexperienced players on day one. I can assure you this was a completely different experience from World of Warcraft today, where there's probably mostly veteran players, so it's a different experience. Why? How is that an argument for anything? Like, we want to preserve the game itself, the sandbox. And if I want to have an experience with only one other person, then so be it. I mean, World of Warcraft is never going to be the same as it was on day one, because I don't know why he's arguing for how a game was played by players. Like, every day it's different players. The experience is never the same, exactly the same. This, I I find it hard to articulate myself about this, but his argument just doesn't make any sense. I hope you understand, but yeah, let's keep going.
So that is not a solution. And the last take that I got from this is
It's not a solution because we can't preserve the game how it was in the year 2018 on the 5th of April, where there were 12 players who goofed off and accidentally killed 6 other players by goofing off. We can never have that again. That was a once in a lifetime experience. We can't preserve that, so we should kill the game. What? What are you even saying? What are you saying? Oh, my head hurts. My head hurts.
and it's the most reasonable to me. This is an initiative. It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait. And the reason I'm not going to wait is because I see the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer side of the conversation.
I have to interject here one more time. I don't even think, like, first of all, he doesn't really understand it. It will include the developer side of things, right? Because, like I said, after the initiative is brought to the parliament and they listen, only then people from the industry and the governments and players will figure this out together. So everyone's side will be included. But I also have to say that usually when there's a problem, you don't include the side, I mean the point of view of the offensive party. Like, the developers are the bad guys here, or the game publishers. They are the bad guys. They are the ones who are taking the games away. they are the problem. Like you don't say, oh my god, we need to hear we need to consider the criminals once it needs the criminal. We need to not put them in jail because they don't want to go to jail after they've been convicted. I the developers are the bad guys. They're doing the bad thing. So as far as I'm concerned, we don't really need to include them at all. Like in the initiative at least, right? But again, even if I agreed with him that we have to hear what developers say, even though they are the ones who are redefining what purchase means in the terms of service or whatever, and don't want to state an end date for their service, but actually it's a product, and we don't have to. Even if I agreed with him on that, even then he doesn't understand that this will go to the parliament, and then everyone will be included in the conversation. Developers, players, and the government. He just doesn't get it. But okay.
Not showing the trials and problems that this could arise inside of the gaming industry for people who are actually making the games you play. I don't have any reason to be quiet about that. And many other developers aren't going to be able to speak on this.
Okay, he doesn't have to be quiet, of course. He can say anything he wants, but people are still going to give him a hard time if he doesn't understand what he's talking about. I mean, everyone who has criticism is allowed to give their criticism, but they also have to take the criticism from other people to their criticism.
As I explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about. Doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many problems with the language as it is currently written.
Again, he doesn't have to stay quiet, but the language is not the problem. The initiative has to be vague. There's no other way around it. This is mandated. And there's even a character limit, so that's not the issue.
I should be able to be talking about this. In fact, I should be talking about this. I am a content creator specifically that is a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, no. With all of that being said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix here. It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game. You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game. You should be told explicitly that you are purchasing a license to that game.
Not exactly, right? Again, it's almost... Yes, every live service game should say that. Every always online live service game should say that. That's an important distinction, right? Because games like Team Fortress already allow you to keep the game, even if Valve disappeared tomorrow, you could still play it. But again, it has to include everything. It has to state that it's a service, or like that you're renting access to the game, and it has to state an end date. But he forgets to say these things because he doesn't consider that an issue, I guess. Yeah, but really, it needs to have an end date as well.
The reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game and damaging the play experience of other players. While this is written in the TOS and the EULA, it's usually not clearly defined at point of sale. Or they throw a giant TOS in front of you and it doesn't really do anything because people skip past it.
Okay, now he's starting to get it. Like in the last video, he thought it was okay, but now I guess he backpedaled on that one, and now he says, yeah, it's not okay to hide this in the EULA or in the terms of service.
If at point of sale it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either leasing or purchasing a license or anything along those lines, that you're not actually buying the game directly, I think it would go a long way to informing consumers of what they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were engaging in.
Yes, I totally agree. That's what I already said. But again, it's different from the last video. In the last video, he said it differently. And again, it's really important that the game has an expiration date as well, because otherwise I think it's still unfair. And the EU legislation also says that it needs to be a thing that is stated.
That makes a lot more sense to me than force all developers to leave the game in a functional, playable state. And that's about...
Yeah, I mean, Like I said, I don't care about the game preservation angle. I just want to keep playing the product I purchased, and if I don't purchase a product, I pay for a service, then it needs to be an actual service, right? You can't just say, hey, buy game, and then take it away anytime you want. It needs to say that I rent the game or lease the game, like he said, but it also needs to have an expiration date. I need to know how long the game will last at the minimum, or because I pay for a service. A service says how long it will last and its conditions. You can't just hide that information from me.
About it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you. And
Okay, guess the video is over. Yeah, so that's it. I already said what I personally think about the industry right at the start. And yeah, I think at the minimum, I just need to know how long the service will last, and it needs to say that it's a service and not a product that I buy. That's the absolute minimum that I want to come out of this. But again, he thinks the initiative is too vague, but he just doesn't understand how that works. Again, the nuances will be figured out later, and everyone will be included. It will be figured out by experts, game developers, players, the government, everyone. And the initiative has to be vague. This is just the first step. We just have to call out the problem. So it's important to vote so this can be a discussion in the first place. I think that's the part that he doesn't understand at all. I can't stress this enough. It has to be vague. There's even a character limit. And I'm not sure how much he backpedaled from the last video, but he repeatedly stated there that it's only single player games. Like that made no sense. But here he seems to have adjusted himself and said, yeah, always online live service games have to tell the player that they don't buy anything, they just rent something, and that's fine. Tell me how long your service will last. Tell me how much money you want for how many years or months for the service. Then it's all right. Okay. Then it's okay by me. Fine with me, right? Fine by me. I mean, I just don't want to buy games or products anymore and then have them taken away from me. I can't avoid it. Like the only solution is to not buy games anymore because there's so many games that do this. Like he said this is a niche case. Even when he referred to single player games with always online, he said that's niche. It's not rare. It happens all the time. So yeah, but again, multiplayer games have to be included and all that. I guess that's it. That's all I have to say. Yeah, I really hope that those videos weren't too damaging to the campaign, because it's really important that we do vote. We need this to be a discussion. We need experts, we need the game developers and players and other experts, the government, to come together and figure this out. This is what the initiative does. This is what leads to the discussion, right? The initiative is not law. He said that himself, but then he seems to forget it or doesn't understand. It's really weird. But yeah, anyway, if you want this to be a discussion, if you hope that they will respond and tell us what's up at the very least, then you should vote. As far as I can see, that's how that works. Okay, bye.